In Japanese folklore, there is a creature called Ryugu no Tsukai. It translates to messenger from the palace of the Dragon King. According to legend, this thing lives at the bottom of the ocean, and when it rises to the surface, catastrophe follows. Earthquakes, tsunamis, the end of the world as you know it. A few days ago, two of them showed up alive on a beach in Cabo San Lucas. At the same time, on the same stretch of sand, and nobody can explain why. Now before you click away, no, an earthquake did not follow. But what actually happened, and what these animals might be telling us, could be more unsettling than any prophecy. What washed ashore in Cabo were oarfish. They are the longest bony fish on the planet. The Guinness record is 36 feet. That is bigger than a school bus. Unconfirmed reports go past 50. They live in a part of the ocean called the mesopelagic zone, between 200 and 1,000 meters deep. That is the ocean's twilight zone. Almost no sunlight reaches it. And it is, according to NOAA, the least explored ecosystem on Earth. Live oarfish have been filmed fewer than a dozen times in all of recorded history. The first video ever came in 2001 when U.S. Navy personnel spotted one during a buoy inspection in the Bahamas. On the entire California coast across the entire 20th century, 19 oarfish were documented. 19 in 100 years. Nobody has ever kept one alive in captivity. In 2019, Japanese researchers managed to hatch larvae from artificially inseminated oarfish eggs. The babies live 4 days. Then they starve to death. We cannot even figure out how to feed them. Finding a single live oarfish in shallow water is the kind of thing a marine biologist could wait an entire career for and never see. Two showed up at the same time, on the same beach. There is no documented case of that ever happening before. So if you have heard of oarfish at all, you probably know them by their other name, Doomsday fish. And the question is not whether the legend is literally true. The question is whether there is some kernel of reality buried inside a story that is much, much older than most people realize. The Japanese name, Ryugu no Tsukai, references Ryujin, the dragon god of the sea. That tradition goes back to at least the Edo period, the 1600s. But the most detailed early account comes from 1819, off the coast of Tsushima, Japan. A glowing creature appeared in the sea, massive. It came back every day for 7 days straight. 800 people gathered in 120 boats. They fired 30 guns at it at the same time. Nothing happened. And then, according to the written records, the creature began speaking at night. It identified itself as a messenger from the Dragon Palace, and it warned of a great evil disease. Not an earthquake, disease. It told people to copy its portrait and distribute it as a protective talisman. That is one of the oldest detailed oarfish encounters we have, and it is strange that the original warning was about pestilence, not tectonic disaster. The Earthquake Association actually comes from a completely different mythological tradition, a giant underground catfish called namazu that supposedly thrashes beneath the Japanese islands and makes the ground shake. The thunder god Takamikazuchi pins it down with a sacred stone at Kashima Shrine. When the god gets distracted, the catfish moves and the earth quakes. After the devastating 1855 Ansei Edo earthquake, hundreds of woodblock prints depicting Namazu flooded Japan. Over time, the oarfish and the catfish stories merged. The fish from the deep inherited the earthquake reputation from a catfish that lives underground. But even setting the mythology aside, oarfish kept showing up in human history in ways that were hard to ignore. In 1808, a 56-foot carcass washed up on the Orkney Islands in Scotland. The Wernerian Natural History Society examined it and formally described it as a new species, a genuine sea creature unknown to science. It was almost certainly a decomposed giant oarfish. 40 years later, in 1848, the captain of HMS Daedalus filed a sworn account published in the Times of London. He described a sea serpent off the Cape of Good Hope, long, undulating body, a mane or crest along its back. The description matches oarfish anatomy almost exactly. For centuries, sailors were seeing these things and had no framework for what they were, so they called them sea serpents. And every time one showed up near a coast, people connected it to whatever bad thing happened next. Then came the event that cemented the modern Doomsday reputation. Between December 2009 and March 2010, roughly 20 oarfish appeared on Japanese beaches. And on March 11, 2011, the magnitude 9 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami hit, killing over 18,000 people. 20 oarfish. Then a catastrophe. That is a hard pattern for a human brain to ignore. But is there actually a mechanism? Could deep-sea fish sense what is coming? There is a Japanese earthquake researcher named Kiyoshi Wadatsumi who has argued that deep-sea fish living near the ocean floor might be more sensitive to geological shifts than surface species. The idea is not insane on its face. These animals live in an environment where pressure, temperature, and chemical composition are incredibly stable. Any disruption, even a subtle one, could theoretically register. And the oarfish's pelvic fins have fleshy tabs that contain cells resembling taste buds, structures that might function as chemical or pressure sensors. Nobody has proven that connection, but nobody has ruled it out either. Now, the honest scientific answer. When researchers actually tested the earthquake link rigorously, it fell apart. The 20 oarfish before Tohoku appeared 12 to 15 months before the earthquake, and they washed up on Japan's western coast, the Sea of Japan side, while the epicenter was on the eastern Pacific coast. The opposite side of the country, that is like saying a bird landing on a roof in London predicted a hurricane in New York a year later. A team at Tokai University tested 336 deep sea fish appearances against 221 earthquakes across 83 years. They found essentially nothing. No deep sea fish appearances preceded any earthquake above magnitude 7. The direct connection, as far as we can currently measure, is not there. But that does not close the book, because something is clearly pushing these animals out of the deep. The folklore might have pointed at the wrong cause while noticing a real signal. These creatures come from one of the most stable, quiet environments in the entire ocean. They do not just show up on beaches for fun. When they surface, something in their world has changed. And to understand what that something might be, you need to know what oarfish actually are, because they are genuinely one of the strangest animals alive. Their skin, when fresh, looks like a mirror. Not figuratively. Scientists describe it as literally reflective, coated in a layer of silvery guanine. Along the back, a single dorsal fin runs the entire length of the body, with over 400 rays. The first 10 to 13 of those rays elongate into a trailing crimson crest, like a crown. That is actually where one of their other names comes from, king of herrings, because fishermen believed these crowned fish led schools of herring through the sea. Their pelvic fins are long, oar-shaped, and tipped with fleshy lobes. Scientists originally thought they used these to row through the water. They do not. The fins are now believed to be sensory organs. The inside of their mouth is jet black, and a close relative has been documented giving off electric shocks when touched. But the truly strange part is how they move. Oarfish do not swim horizontally like a normal fish. They hover vertically, head up, tail down. They hold position in the water column by gently undulating that long dorsal fin, while the rest of the body stays almost perfectly still. One researcher described it bluntly. If you are just beating your dorsal fin and you have this enormous 600-pound body, you are not going anywhere fast. They are profoundly weak swimmers. They evolved in a part of the ocean where there are almost no strong currents and built almost no muscle mass. And that is exactly why the surface is a death sentence. An oarfish that gets caught in a current and pushed upward has no way to fight back down. It was never designed to escape that situation. An animal longer than a school bus, one that has survived in the deep ocean for millions of years, can be killed by drifting a few hundred meters in the wrong direction. There is one more thing about their bodies that changes how you think about every oarfish photo you have ever seen. They practice serial autotomy. That means they repeatedly amputate their own tails throughout their lives. Not because a predator attacked them. They do it themselves. The wound heals into a smooth, scarred stump, but the tail never grows back. A specimen found in Sweden, the country's first oarfish in 130 years, had an old healed stump with no tooth marks on it, proving it had lived years after shedding its own tail. Why would a fish cut itself in half on purpose? A Smithsonian researcher named Tyson Roberts thinks it is about efficiency. All vital organs sit in the front quarter of the body. The entire back end is mostly just muscle and a mysterious structure called the post-abdominal gastric cacum, a tube that runs from the stomach all the way to the tip of the tail. Nobody knows what it does. So the animal drops ballast it does not need. What remains swims better. And that means every size measurement ever taken for an oarfish might be wrong. You never know if the one you are looking at used to be longer. So now you have the picture. An animal that is solitary by nature, that cannot swim against a current, that lives in a part of the ocean we have barely explored, that amputates its own body to survive, and two of them showed up together. That is what makes the Cabo event so strange. Oarfish are explicitly described in the scientific literature as solitary. They live alone. The only documented exception is spawning. When it is time to reproduce, they find each other somehow in the darkness of the mesopelagic, and that is the only known reason two oarfish would ever be in the same place at the same time. Here is where it gets interesting. Oarfish spawning off Mexico has been documented between July and December. The Cabo event happened in late February. That is months outside the known breeding window. So either these two were mating out of season, which would itself be a significant finding, or they were together for a completely different reason, which might be even more significant. In 2013, two oarfish stranded in California, 5 days apart and 60 miles apart. One of them, a 14-foot female, had 6-foot-long ovaries packed with hundreds of thousands of eggs. Researchers suggested those two might have been a mating pair that drifted apart after straying into shallow water. If the Cabo pair was also reproductive, that means the breeding window we have on record might simply be wrong. We would be rewriting the biology of a fish we have barely studied from a handful of dead specimens. But the other hypotheses are just as compelling. Maybe a shared environmental stressor hit both animals at once. A sudden temperature shift, an oxygen drop, a current anomaly in the mesopelagic. El Nino and La Nina years are known to correlate with oarfish strandings because warmer surface water pushes krill upward, drawing oarfish out of their depth. And once they are up, they are stuck. If both fish were hunting the same krill patch in the same thermal layer, when conditions shifted, one disruption could push both of them shoreward. Disease is possible too. Past necropsies have found oarfish carrying larval tapeworms up to 6 inches long, juvenile nematodes, and spiny-headed worms. If both animals were fighting the same pathogen or the same parasite load, they could have become disoriented simultaneously. And the geography itself matters. Baja California Sur has underwater canyons that channel deep water unusually close to shore. A Scripps Institution report on a different stranding explained that this topography increases the odds that disoriented deep water animals end up in the surf. Two confused oarfish drifting in the deep could have been funneled toward the exact same beach by the shape of the seafloor below them. But we do not actually know, and that is the part that hurts. Because when those two oarfish were pushed back into the ocean, the rarest biological event in modern marine science disappeared without a single tissue sample. No blood draw, no parasite check, no reproductive status exam, no genetic comparison between the two animals. Nothing. Consider what scientists extracted from one dead oarfish that stranded in La Jolla, California in August 2024. A joint team from Scripps NOAA and Cal State Fullerton collected enough material to generate the first ever chromosome-level genome of the world's longest bony fish. They mapped its diet through stable isotopes. They examined its gill structure. They checked for microplastics and DDT contamination. From one specimen, one. In Cabo, two live oarfish surfaced together for the first time in recorded history, and the scientific yield was 0. Both animals swam back into the dark. An ichthyologist at Scripps named Ben Frabel said it simply: rare encounters like these provide an amazing opportunity to learn more about this species. That opportunity is gone, and the uncomfortable truth is that these encounters are not staying rare. 3 oarfish in Southern California in just 3 months during 2024. At least 6 or 7 confirmed sightings worldwide in 2025, including 4 oarfish found in a single weekend along the Baja California coast. And now, in 2026, 2 alive on the same beach at the same time. The mesopelagic zone where these animals live covers roughly 60% of the Earth's surface. It holds up to 90% of the planet's total fish biomass. It cycles between 5 and 12 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere every year, and research published in Nature Climate Change found that climate velocities in this zone are projected to be 4 to 11 times higher than what is happening at the surface by the end of this century. In plain language, conditions in the Middle Ocean are set to shift faster than anything we can observe on the surface. A separate study looked back 460,000 years and found that during periods warmer than the present, both the production and diversity of mesopelagic life declined drastically. We are watching creatures surface from a layer of ocean that we have explored less than the surface of Mars, a layer that processes more carbon than most people realize exists, a layer that is changing in ways we cannot yet fully measure. The old stories got the details wrong. These are not earthquake prophets, but they might be messengers from a part of the planet we have been ignoring, a part that is now sending animals to the surface more often than at any point in recorded history. And they keep showing up. If you want to stay on top of discoveries that quietly reshape what we think we know, you know what to do.